Okay. So, okay. Once upon a time, 27,000 BC, there was a little village nestled right next to the hills called Miracle. And there was the Miracle Mountains, which were 4,000 feet high, and with two waterfalls coming off the mountains that both formed a river, and the rivers met together and formed a lake. And the lake was Lake Miracle. And then out of the lake, there's just one river. And the town was next to the lake. In the town, there was about 125 people. And they had all lived generation after generation in Miracle. And all they knew was that area. They never saw any other people. And it was beautiful. The whole green. And around the lake, there would be tall grass and lilacs and daffodils and butterflies and ducks in the lake and frogs and fish. And they can go swimming in the lake. And they had fresh water from the rivers that went into the lake and out of the lake. And Miracle was called Miracle because originally they knew, the original ancestors knew that they came from the stars. They used to be in light bodies, and they lived in the stars. And at some point, they somehow found a way to live on Earth and be in Earth bodies, and they consider that to be a miracle. And that's why they called the town Miracle, because for them to be in life was a miracle. And the town was governed by 10 elders, and to be one of the elders, you had to be at least 60 years old, have a lot of life experience. And the head elder in charge of the council was Irma. And Irma was 80 years old, and she was a grandmother. And she worked with all the other elders. And they had an elder for different areas. Like one elder who was a grandfather, he was in charge of time and planning. He would keep notes of where the sun would be and where it would come up in the winter, where it would go down in the summer, and he'd have an idea of how much sunlight there'd be. And then he formed clocks that were based on a sundial, and they would change the dial based on the time of the year. And he knew how to do that, and so he did all the time planning for the town. And obviously he was really good with math. And then there was another elder who was in charge of growing all the crops, all the stuff they grow, the vegetables, the fruits, everything they would grow to eat, or herbs for medicine, or food for the animals. He was in charge. Another grandfather was in charge of all the crops. Third grandfather was in charge of hunting, where they go looking for animals. And they had some different animals they would use for both for eating and also for making clothes. They had the wool from sheep, and they had the skins from animals. And then another grandfather was in charge of the building, and he would supervise where they would make all their buildings that they lived in. They would make from mud from the lakes and the tall grass, and they'd turn them into like bricks, like big bricks, and let them dry out in the sun. And they would make the bricks during the summertime where they would dry out well. And he supervised all the building. Another grandmother was in charge of the kids, and she actually had multiple assistants because there was the very young kids, then there was the more just need to be taken care of by their mothers, and there's an elder who worked with the mothers on how they were taking care of their children so that they were able to provide for them. And another assistant elder would work when the kids were first young and in school and learning how to do different things. And they were taught to do the things that the town needed, like to work with the farming or to work with making bricks. I mean, the kids didn't go to school and read out of books and do math problems. They learned about nature, they learned about life, and they learned how to do things to contribute to the town. And then another assistant elder would work with the older teenagers who are more capable of doing more projects, of working, in the fields, of doing the hunting. And then another grandmother she was in charge of the clothes. They'd have all the clothes. They would make shoes. And each one of the elders had different assistants. The one that worked with the children had the most assistants because there's a lot to do with all these kids. So, and then was another elder grandmother who worked with the prayers and ceremony, and she was also a healer and a doctor, a natural doctor. And so besides the prayers and ceremony, she would attend to people if they needed help with something because there was an issue with their body. And she had apprenticed from her grandmother, so she had grown up since she was little, and all of them did. All the people in Miracle grew up from when they were born and were integrated into the town and into the different areas that they would deal with. And so it was all first nature to them. It was like it was just so natural. And they were very cooperative. And there was another elder, another grandmother, and she was in charge of harmony. So if people weren't getting along, or there was a project and the different sides of the project weren't getting along, she would preside and she would sort out what was needed so that things could get done and there would be harmony. And so she was actually the elder of harmony. So it was really quite a council, and they met every Thursday at 7 to 9 o'clock. And they'd have their council meeting, and if somebody from the town had any issues, there was, 1 hour for the council meeting. There's another hour for people from the town to present different things they wanted the council's support on, or they wanted to introduce for the council to implement for the town of Miracle. And they where they lived, it was very green. The grass was lush. It was a deep green. And the mountains were beautiful, particularly with the waterfalls. And they had done different expeditions back 5 miles, 10 miles back in the mountains. And they just found more and more mountains. So they just didn't really go further back in the mountains because they already looked and just found more mountains. And it seemed like they just kept going. And so one council meeting, and it was in the summer when the days were longer. There was more sunlight. And the Irma said it was time, that she had a dream, that it was time to do some more exploring. So they had one of the elders, another grandfather, was in charge of exploration, and there was 10 runners who were all the young men, like between like maybe 18 and 28, and they were trained to run up to 100 miles a day, where they can run 100 miles straight. And what Irma presented was that, as peaceful and wonderful as it was just being all by themselves, she felt that there was something else out there that they needed to be good for them to find out about. So she sent the runners in, not back in the mountains, but all the other directions, like parallel to the mountains, and then different angles so that they just spread out, 10 of them. And when you have 10 people running 100 miles, they're covering a lot of territory. And one of the runners was named Joshua. And the runners would go, they would have a blanket, and they'd also carry water and dried food. And they tracked the different trails and kept notes, and that's what the head elder did, so they would know where there was rivers, ponds, where they could get more water, because based on running 100 miles, they would go through a lot of water, so carrying a lot of water was too much weight. But they couldn't run that far without water, so they would keep track of where the water was, so they could get it along the way. And they would have a deerskin bag that had been sewn, and they would then gather water and drink it, and then gather more. And Joshua, he saw that the sun was going down, and it was really beautiful. It was the middle of summer, and the sky was crystal blue, and the sunlight was, he saw it just going down, and the radiance of the rays of light. And then up ahead he saw a tree, and just as the sun was going down, he got to this tree. The tree was, even though it was alive, the part he entered was hollow. And it was big enough that he could even lay down in it. It was a big tree. When Joshua got there, he saw there was a hole in the tree, and he could look out where it was further away, further than he had gone. And he saw something he'd never seen before. And he saw these people, and they were called the rainbow. He called them the rainbow people. And he saw they were just, because after the sun went down, they lit fires, like different bonfires. There was maybe thousand of the rainbow people. The reason he called them the rainbow people is because they'd have outfits like pants or skirts, like long sleeve shirts, and they'd be a solid color. So they would have like a deep red, then they'd also have a pink and a deep orange and a light orange and like sort of deep golden yellow and a very light yellow, and it was almost like whitish, a deep green, a light green, a deep blue, a midnight blue, and then a light turquoise blue, and a deep purple, and then a lilac, and then they had a magenta, a light magenta, very deep violet actually, and then a very light violet. It's between magenta and violet, but it's on the light purple side. And then so he would see that with the fires, he could see that somehow with the clothes they were wearing, the sunlight, the fire would glisten, or something in the dyes, and their clothes would have it's almost like they were sparkling, and the people would go in circles, and they would go clockwise. They'd go to the right, and there'd be like 10 people in a circle, and they would just flow as a circle, walking very deliberately, making sure that each step connected solidly with the earth. And they continued in their circle. And as they kept doing this, then pretty soon there was maybe 100 circles, and they were all touching each other. So each circle would go right next to where the other one was, and they were all the different colors. And the synergy of the people going around the circle, it was so smooth. And Joshua looked at them, and he'd never seen anything like this. First, there was like 1,000 people. He'd never seen any other people, or even heard of other people outside of Miracle. And then these colors were so beautiful and luminescent that they even reflected the light of the fires, and it would radiate like sparks. There's something in the dyes they got, and the colors were so beautiful. And there was, 14 different colors. One of every color, the rainbow, on the dark, rich hue, and one on a very light hue. And so there was quite a texture of light, something that Joshua had never seen before. And he just looked, and he was glad he had found the tree, because he knew that nobody could see him. Everybody was off maybe at least 200, maybe 300 feet away from where he was. And if they didn't have the fires, it was twilight, but as it got darker, he could actually even see better with the light of the fire. And as they'd walk around, the different groups they would do a different sound. Each group did a slightly different sound, and they'd just make a low, like a hum, and they would just continue in the same sound and the same motion of going around in a circle, and the circles just going right next to each other. So it looked like a solid fabric of rainbow people. And Joshua was just amazed. He'd never even heard stories of anything like this. And as he was watching, and he was getting very transfixed, and then, he saw it was getting dark, and he was all alone, just got scared for a moment, and he just went out a few feet out of the tree and just looked around just to make sure. that nobody was coming over where he was, because there's only one of him. And he saw everything was just very serene and peaceful. And he went back in the tree and went back watching. And as he watched, the circles of the rainbow people continue to go around in their circle and do their sound. And then all the sounds formed like a symphony of sounds, almost like, even though it was different than the frogs, when a lot of frogs make sound in the ear and the cricket, this was like a higher vibrational sound that people were making. And as he was watching this, Joshua got transfixed. And he started having a conscious memory of being in the stars. And even though he knew originally the people of Miracle came from the stars, he never had an experience like this before. And he felt like this vibrant light filling his body. And his body felt really big, like he was 3 times as big. And he touched the skin and he saw that his body was still the same. And then he realized that he was in a starlight body. And he had memories of living in the stars and how they would be, and he started feeling like this high level vibrance of color and of sound. And then he actually had memories of being in the stars. He could see that the stars are actually like a pure white light. And what happened is that there's different people that were light beings that would be in the stars, and they would vibrate with different colors. And the different colors would bring different colors of the rainbow into the stars, and then the white light would radiate those colors and would twinkle, and there'd be like rainbow light coming out of the stars. It was so beautiful. And Joshua felt transcendent. He felt like he was going to float out of his body and go into the stars. And so he thought, since there was only one of him there, that he better be safe and stay aware. So he kept watching and made himself just subtle as the rainbow people continued in their circles, their 30-foot across circles of rotating to the right, a full circle of each color, all the colors touching each other and forming like this incredible radiance of light and sound. And Joshua felt just a feeling in his body he never felt before. He felt so much energy and so much lightness. He almost felt like he could just run back right then, but he didn't want to go back in the dark. It's too hard to see. And so he focused on just, as he saw that after many hours, the group stopped, the people stopped the circles, and they seemed to go back to what was their village, but he couldn't really see where they went because the fires went out, so he couldn't see anything. And he slept there. And that night he had a dream. And he dreamed that he was living back in the stars, and that he was a light being with other light beings. And they just focused on this high frequency light that was very vibrant, had a sound to it, it had colors, it was very radiant, extremely radiant. Well, they were working with the energy of the stars, so they were broadcasting their light from the stars. The starlight just broadcast everywhere across the universe. He couldn't even see. It just kept going, and he would see that there was some stars that were more just white, and there are other stars that were rainbow colors, or might be a blue or purple. There were different colors, and he knew that they were those colors because of the light beams that were lived in them, and they were bringing that color to the star, the different stars. And when Joshua woke up, he felt amazing. He felt like so full of light, so full, so open, so abundant. His heart was open. He was happy. He didn't even feel tired from running 100 miles yesterday. And even though the plan was for him to look around for an hour before running home, he decided that what he had seen was too important for him to take any chances with. And then what he should do is just not look around and just run back and report to the elders and come back another time with like a group, maybe 5, at least 5, maybe 10 of them, where they could come as a group. And he thought he'd bring gifts, welcoming gifts to the rainbow people, so they would take them in. They seemed like very peaceful people. And he woke up in the morning and he looked out. And at first he was very careful as he came out of the tree. And he looked out and he didn't see anything. And he looked at the fields where it seemed like about 1,000 of the rainbow people. And all he saw was grass. He didn't see anything, could even tell that they were even there. And he thought, wow, that's funny. He thought he'd see the grass matted down or something, but all he saw was grass and nothing else. And he had some of his water and some of his food, and he was very excited to report back to the council. And specifically, that it was set up by Irma that they would go on a Wednesday and come back on a Thursday, so they could come right back to the council meeting when all the elders were there and report on what they had seen. And Joshua was so excited when he was running. He felt lighter than ever. He was amazed he didn't even feel tired. He ran all the way back to Miracle. He could tell he was getting close because he looked up. He could see the Miracle Mountains. He could see the sun was about to go down. He could see the sunlight glistening on the waterfalls. And he knew that he was getting close to home. And he got back and he went to the place where the elders were meeting, and the other runners came back too, and the council said, first, before we talk, here, all of you eat. You've had a long 2 days. And they served them food, and they were hungry. They ate a lot. After all, they had all just run 200 miles in 2 days. And after they finished eating, the Irma said, okay, now it's time for all of you to make a report. And immediately, Joshua stood up and said, I want to go first. And he was all excited. He couldn't wait to tell them what he had seen. And he told them about the rainbow people, about 1,000 people, about 8 times as many people as lived in Miracle, and how they were wearing the rainbow colors, how there'd be solid colors, and somehow he didn't know how, but the clothes would even glisten in the light of the fire. And he shared about feeling so transcendent and feeling so light. And he felt, even while I was watching, that he was going into the stars, and he felt so vibrant, like his light was just radiating so strongly and so easily, and it felt so good. And he also told him about his dream, what he had dreamed. And when he was done sharing, Irma had a big smile on her face, and the other elders were smiling too. And Joshua thought to himself, wow, this must be good. And he looked at the other brothers, and you can tell by looking at their faces that they didn't have the same kind of story to tell. They all looked amazed from just what he had shared. And then Irma spoke and said, Joshua, the rainbow people you saw, they're some of our original ancestors from the stars. We all lived in the stars. We all were into radiation of light, radiation of color, radiation of sound, and we're all into synergizing our energy together and vibrating with the stars and each other and sending that energy out to the universe. And it just felt good. And Irma said, Joshua, this is amazing. Yes, we're going to have to plan another trip where we'll send at least 5 of you, maybe all 10, and you can go for, you run for one day and have 3 days to be there and 1 day to come back. I think contact with these people could be very important. And everyone was like, I don't know if we'll ever see them again, if they were just there doing that and then sort of turned back in the light bodies, went to the stars, or if they lived there. And they said they would find out. But one thing for sure, Irma knew that they were all descended from the stars like they were. Maybe they still live there. She didn't know. And all the elders were like, finally, this is the first time in the whole history of miracle that they'd ever seen outside people. And to see like such an unusual sight of so many of them, 1,000 of them, with the vibrant colors and rainbow people and how they were in ceremony together. And maybe, they're in their dance, creating that rainbow harmony on the land that was like the stars of the land meeting in the vibrancy of light. So all the elders were quite pleased. And Joshua was thrilled that he was the one who had found this and said he'd be happy to go back and lead another journey to go see the star people. And Irma said, well, we have to bring gifts. And she said, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to hear from everybody else and see what they see, regardless whether they've found lakes, animals, anything. We like to know what's out there. And we haven't gone 100 miles in a long time, in many, many years. And so everybody else reported, and their reports were pretty simple. They talked about rivers, they talked about animals, they talked about different vegetation. A few of them had even brought back some nuts, flowers, and some herbs that they'd found. But nobody else had seen people. Nobody else had a startling discovery like Joshua. But they were grateful that Joshua did, and they were looking forward to joining him. So after they'd all shared about everything they had seen, and then the head grandfather of time and planning, who also did maps, and there was the elder in charge of the runners, and those two elders coordinated and took all the information from the runners and mapped out, lakes and rivers where they said they were, and just so they had more of an idea of how, where to go to find water and what those areas were. And then they planned and they decided that it was so important seeing these rainbow people from the stars. They had to be from the stars. And that this was such a meaningful discovery that they would send all 10 runners, and they would do it in they'd wait a whole month they would wait, and they would train because they wanted to carry more stuff. They wanted to carry gifts. They wanted to carry more food because they were going to be gone for 5 days. They'd be able to get more water, but they need to bring more food, and they might need even some changes of clothes. They can get very sweaty and sticky and might need to change tops. So they had to bring some more things. And the way the runners would practice is they would carry a sack, and instead of rocks in it, because rocks would be hard against their back, they'd carry it full of like mud or dirt. The best thing was dirt because the dirt wasn't wet. And they carry a whole heavy pack, and then they would do their normal run every day with these heavy packs of dirt, maybe 50 pounds. And they would run for 10 miles one day. The second day they'd run 20 miles. They go back and forth between 10 and 20 miles just as their daily run, carrying about 50 pounds of dirt so that they were strong enough to run and carry stuff at the same time. And we made their plans to go back in a month. And the town was all excited, and they had to figure out what to bring. And Irma asked Joshua, since he was the only one who saw them, only one who saw the rainbow people, like what, if he had any ideas of what they would like what could they give them so they would know that they were friendly and wanted to join forces with them, at least on friendly terms. And Joshua thought, he said, Irma, well, I think for them to know that we are with them, whether we're one in spirit, that we could make where, as an art project, get a very large but thin piece of bark and then draw the circles, the colors, and draw what I saw and give that to them as a present. And Irma said, Joshua, that's a wonderful idea. Then they'll know that either you had seen them or had a vision of them. They would know that you already knew them. She thought that was wonderful. So the elder who was in charge of signs and art projects, and even supervised the teacher who worked with the kids, she gave him the project of doing this drawing the way that Joshua described it. And at first they had a hard time getting all the colors the way Joshua described them. They didn't have all those pigments from the flowers or berries or the things they used for color. And they had to look around for more so they can get all the colors or even mix them together. It was really quite a project to try to come up with all these different colors. However, they did, and they were able to create close enough to the 14 colors Joshua saw, the 7 really deep colors of the rainbow, the 7 really light colors of the rainbow. And they made a big mural out of a big piece of bark from a tree, but it was thin, so they could roll it up and then be able to carry it, run with it tied on top of their pack, and running carefully to not hurt it. And so the council was excited, all excited that not only had they found people, but they were actually even, it seemed like they were going back into their heritage of being star people. And Irma asked Joshua if he could describe the sounds that he heard, which he did, but there was more sounds than he could tell them. But he made some of the sounds, and then he imagined that he was back there, and he went into the energy state he had been in, where he was feeling like his body was 3 times as big because he was in his energy body, which was about 3 times as big as his body. And then he went into such a intensity of going into the energy that while he was doing it, he literally just passed out and fell down. And he didn't get hurt. He was fine. And they attended to him and gave him some water and said, Joshua, what happened to you? And he said, oh, don't worry, I felt great. I felt like I was back in the stars and I was a pure light being, and I felt so light, I wasn't even in my body anymore. That's what happened. And everybody looked at him, and the elders picked their eyes up like, whoa, because they all knew they came from the stars. And they all knew they had a direct correlation, but they just didn't remember the details. And Joshua was jogging their memories of their sense of who they were. And so that meeting, even though they were supposed to end at 9, they ended up going all the way to 10 o'clock, just because all the council and all the runners were so excited about this. And even though all the other runners were jealous, like that Joshua found this, they were also happy because next time they got to go with him. And since they're very cooperatively oriented, they felt like this bonding, this synergy, that somehow discovering these rainbow star people was somehow bringing the people of Miracle back to their roots and back to their synergy from the stars, where they were just one with the universe in pure light, in pure vibrant light. And that night, amazingly enough, when the elders woke up the next day and they talked, they all had the same dream. And it was the same dream that Joshua had when he had seen the rainbow people and felt like he was back in the stars. They all had the same dream as Joshua. And then they knew, even though they knew that that's where they came from and that that's who they were, they could feel it even more. And then with these colors, because they had to develop these different tones, they didn't have them all. And the head elder in charge of signs and doing art had supervised over the development of all these different colors to make sure they could get as close as possible for the gift they give the rainbow people. Well, what happened was they were all so excited about this colors. So they're so beautiful, they're so radiant. They made them feel so good, so expansive, that they took these colors and they put them in, not only in different clothes, on buildings, they'd make pictures, and they brought more of this color, more of this light into Miracle. And it was beautiful. It just made the whole town more radiant, and against the green grass that was growing everywhere, and the Miracle Mountains with the waterfalls and the sunlight glistening in the water and glistening off the lake. They were just like, oh my goodness, This is amazing. So they were all very pleased, and they're very happy that Joshua had been able to not only find the rainbow people, but able to have such an experience that he could report back to them so they could all get a feeling for what he had seen and what he had felt. And Joshua felt very special, and he also felt like a responsibility. He needed to bring everybody, and he was excited that he would get to do that he would be in charge of the expedition. And that is the end of the story.